Hello and welcome to Microfile, which gives you another opportunity to view some of the best of the recent series of Micro Live.
This week, we look at computerised personal information. Duncan Campbell sets the scene with an excerpt from the BBC series Secret Society.
It's market day in the Yorkshire town of Knaresborough. We wanted to demonstrate just how much information is held on these private databanks and to find out how people reacted. Inside the Tourist Information Centre in the town square, we set up a computer inquiry system with a terminal and screen linked directly to two private databanks. And then we approached some unsuspecting shoppers. There was no shortage of volunteers, people naturally curious to know what the computer might reveal and willing to tell us their reactions. But what would the computer say? Neither we nor our volunteers knew the answer.
And how you react to that?
Okay, fine.
Okay.
It's number 12, St Paul's Road.
And it's come back with the name of a man who doesn't have your surname.
Mm-hmm.
Is that the man's name known to you?
Yes, that's my husband.
How do you feel?
Anne Watson's normally known by her maiden name because of her work.
I think that's absolutely disgusting. I mean, I don't see why you should have access to that kind of information. I mean, that in particular could be quite embarrassing, couldn't it? It's bad enough that we just get vast amounts of unsolicited mail, you know, by this, by that, and phone calls, financial services, speaking as though they're personal phone calls. Now you can understand why.
Our next volunteer was also faced with the name of the man she was living with.
Oh, yeah.
You're Bridget Howard?
Yeah,
And can I ask you who Mark Golding is?
a boyfriend.
And
Yeah.
you're sharing a house together?
Yeah, we just bought it, yeah.
Well, I mean, you're saying you accept, isn't it?
Yes, it doesn't bother me because I've known that information is held for so long. The fact that it's on computer is not really any different from it being in print.
That's amazing.
I hope it doesn't tell you about my 5 years in Dartmoor or anything like that.
Well, your first name's Walter, though you didn't tell me that, and you live with a woman called Edith Smith.
True.
How do you feel about suddenly being presented with a
Well,
computer?
I'm a bit disturbed, I suppose everyone else is, aren't
Yes.
they? I do get a lot of unsolicited mail.
Yes.
I mean, who doesn't?
We interviewed 10 people. In every case, the computer produced information about them and a complete list of other adults in the household. 9 of the 10 objected strongly to the idea that personal information about them was so easily available and to complete strangers. In one case, the financial information was so embarrassing, we agreed not to identify the person. But every one of them complained about unsolicited mail, and they were angry at this use of the voters' roll.
Had I known that the voters' roll would be used like this, I would have done something. I don't quite know what, but I would have made my feelings known.
It's compulsory for all adults to fill in this form so they can be sure that they do get the chance to vote. But the form doesn't tell you that the information may be sold to and used by anyone else. These days, most local councils keep the electoral register on computer. The voters' roll can be used by election candidates or consulted in town halls and public libraries. It's a useful check on who's entitled to vote. But every council, except one, sells the information on the rolls without asking anyone's permission.
Originally, those lists of your personal information were bought and sold by companies interested in your status as a consumer, a spender of money. They were able to tie in your details to computerised letters to give a personalised hard sell of their product. But other parties have become interested in such lists. Fref reports from Washington, D.C.
Paul Simon is the Democratic senator for Illinois, representing 11.5 million people. Unlike a British MP who's lucky to have a single researcher, he has a staff of 50 to help him with day-to-day business. His suite of offices has a network of computer terminals linked to databases of all kinds, providing news, statistics, and the very latest state of any American law.
We get about 1,000 letters a day on every kind of a subject. People ask me to vote against this or for that. And because of computers, we can go back then 3 weeks from now or 6 weeks from now and say, this is what happened on this bill. It passed, I voted this way. You can give them information that, frankly, without computers, to do it manually, you just couldn't do.
Every letter that comes in is scanned by a skilled researcher. The chances are that it can be answered using one of many hundreds of standard letters and paragraphs which are constantly being updated by political aides. Once the letter is marked, it's passed to the word processor, where the paragraphs are bolted together and topped and tailed with salutations from the great man himself. The finished letters are then sent electronically to central laser printers and envelope stuffing and stamping machines to be posted at the taxpayer's expense. The result, personalized replies created by a slick production line process. And of course, the senator's signature is also put on by the computer.
That's something of the new practice of politics, but there's an old concern that's never far from a politician's mind, which is getting re-elected, which takes money, lots of it. With the exception of presidential races, there's no limit on campaign spending in America. More than one senator has put as much as $12 million into reaching office. That's not the kind of money you find in cookie jars. So to raise it, politicians are turning to a new group of power brokers, consultants with a simple idea. They're taking developments in computerized direct mail advertising and telemarketing schemes, originally designed for private industry, and are using them to reshape the American political landscape.
Direct mail in America is the third largest form of advertising, so it's advertising. We are in a form of a letter explaining the project, the cause, and asking people to send a contribution, to write to their congressmen or senators, make phone calls, and get involved in the political process and help pay for the advertisement at the same time. In 1983, we mailed 83.5 million letters. In 1984, we mailed about 102 million letters. So over the years, we've raised a fair amount of money to support causes for lower taxes, strong national defense, from literally millions and millions of people.
So how do they find you? Well, the answer is a little sharp thinking and a lot of computer time. Just living, you leave a trail. You join organizations, you subscribe to magazines, you pay your bills. And at the other end of every one of those actions, there's someone keeping a list. This great heavy book is a directory of people advertising computerized mailing lists like this for rent. You can find almost anything in here. For example, just flipping through at random, we see mathematical specialists, upper management administrators by sex and income. That would be useful in things. The Greater Chicagoland Area Catholics. And over here, your gateway to the affluent black market. Now, this is described as black families, professionals and business executives, including members and leaders of recognized black organizations. Now, clearly, this would be valuable to a political candidate. There are 115,000 names on the list, and all those people are available to you for only $65 per thousand. In the American private sector, there are no restrictions on how lists like these can be used. And these are just the companies that advertise. There are others with lists more sensitive, more carefully targeted, that are only available if you've got the right connections. That listing we found in the book for affluent blacks, how would a politician go about using that?
Well, for example, if you were a Republican and you wanted to bring those people into your organization, you would probably concentrate in rural areas in the South where affluent blacks would tend to be more Republican-oriented. Pretty well forget it in the big cities where they tend to be assimilated into the power structure that currently exists.
So what you do is you'd actually take a section of the list and compare it to some other list, perhaps?
The amazing thing about the computer technology is your ability to cross-reference lists, so that if you want to mail to a black person who is against gun control and in favor of abortion, you can find a list of those people, any combination of factors that you want.
Now we have a situation where literally millions of people, unprecedented in world history, millions of people are giving $5, $10, $20 to their favorite candidate, their political cause, their political party, and you have, in a sense, opened up that back room, smoke-filled room, and put a lot of sunlight in it and let millions of people participate.
Congressional campaign spending is out of control. In the last campaign in 1984, on the average, winners spent $3 million. And on the average, and some spent 16 million or 12 million or 10 million. So raising money to run for office is becoming almost a full-time job, and it's diverting the attention of office holders away from their responsibilities, and it's making the ability to raise substantial amounts of money almost a prerequisite of office.
Oh, it is very expensive. If you get back $3 for every $2 that you spend, it is regarded as very successful.
The more money is raised, the more it's being spent on sophisticated ways of influencing voters. In this technique, they find out your views and get them on computer.
May I please speak with John Peace? Mr. Peace, my name is Allison, and I'm calling for Senator Fritz Hollings. It would help Fritz do a better job if I could take just a minute to ask you your opinion on some issues facing South Carolina and the country. Would that be okay? Which two of the following problems should Senator Hollings try the hardest to solve? Federal budget deficit, tax reform, national defense.
A phone call like this enables the politicians and the special interest groups to know what concerns you. Then they can send you very closely targeted mail on quite specific issues.
What we're trying to do is discern information that we can mail voters and give them a candidate's particular views so that it's much better targeted. I mean, if you care about the environment, why should I be talking to you about the deficit? Or vice versa. I mean, what I want to do is speak specifically to your concerns rather than generalize it. I mean, in American politics, TV tends to homogenize the messages. And what we're trying to do is become more specific, and the use of connecting a telephone to a computer to direct mail to the telephone, again, allows me to communicate in a two-way dialogue with a voter.
This is the kind of thing that might land on your front doormat. It's part of a gun control campaign and designed to get you to write to your congressman. A blunt mock-up of an advertisement exposes the activities of one congressman accused of being in the pay of the handgun lobby. The idea is that if enough people are persuaded to send this to him, he might change his mind.
To be effective in direct mail, you have to scream at people. I find inevitably the direct mail pieces we use, I have to tone them down. And the direct mail people are always unhappy when I tone them down because they say they're going to be less successful. Direct mail appeals tend to be extreme.
The use of direct mail enables a candidate to say different things to different people, depending on which list you're renting.
Let me put that in plain English. It gives them a chance to lie a little better.
It gives a chance to talk about one part of their record, one part of their policy to one group, and another part to another, and those two may be very much in conflict, unlike television, in which you generally, that's a mass means of communication, you have to say the same thing to everybody.
Finally, there's the danger of the abuse or misuse of information stored on all those computer lists.
The laws are going to have to adjust to protect privacy for people, to make sure that government and people in the private sector don't invade our lives unnecessarily.
Computer-targeted direct mail is now increasingly used in this country, particularly by political parties. In fact, the Conservative Party has been one of the largest direct mailers in the country. They created their lists by combining the 1981 census with other publicly available computerised information lists, like the British Telecom Register of Shareholders. But British Telecom are not too keen on this, and they've joined with other leading companies in a bid to limit the exploitation of their registers of shareholders.
At least in this country, there are laws which restrict the use of direct mail during general elections. Both the Conservatives and the Alliance scrapped their direct mail election campaign after taking legal advice. But the law only applies to the actual run-up to the election itself. So it seems that as long as the party in power, which of course chooses the date of an election, as long as they've not announced that date, there are no restrictions.
Well, if you don't want to receive direct mail at all, or if you only want a limited amount, there is an organisation that you can write to and you can put your name on their list. But the Mailing Preference Service, as it's called, exists primarily to help the direct mailers, who of course don't want to waste their money writing to people who simply bin their efforts. If their computers find your name on the mailing preference list, they won't send you unsolicited mail. Well, the address to write to is Mailing Preference Service, Free Post 22, London W1E7EZ. And you needn't put a stamp on the letter, as it's a free post address.
By the way, the political parties don't subscribe to this service, so you may well still get letters from them. That's if they decide you're worth writing to.
At least you have a certain amount of control over the use of your personal data for direct mailing. But earlier in the MicroLive series, we investigated claims that personal or private information could be obtained in other, rather more sinister ways.
Well, here is a piece of confidential information. Please enter your password, it says, and I'll just finish it off. There it is. And fortunately for me, you can't read it. Or can you? Any piece of equipment like this contains thousands of electronic switches. As those switches change state, they give out radio signals in all directions, and those signals can be picked up some distance away. This is the kind of equipment you would need. It was assembled for just about £1,000, no more than the cost of an ordinary personal computer. And while I've been talking, Sean Walker, who designed the equipment, has been tuning in. Sean, what have you got here?
Well, basically, Fred, what we've got is a suitable area, which in this case is a CB antenna. We've got a VHF multiband manually tuned receiver, some signal processing, fed to a synchronised visual display unit.
Right, let's put that rather more simply. This is a kind of souped-up version, I think, of a television receiver, is that right?
That's correct, it's just a little bit more wideband.
Right, greater frequencies then. And this you call a synchronised VDU. Synchronised to what?
Well, the data we're receiving has no synchronising pulses, so what we do is generate our own and add it with the data.
So you are tuning the timings of this machine into the timings of the IBM Micro over there?
That's correct.
Right, OK, well, here's the acid test. What is my password?
Domino.
Domino is correct. Let's see where it is. It's just drifting off the screen a bit. But if we compare that with the original screen... Ah, yes, there it is. There is my password, Domino. Very good reception.
Well, in fact, that demonstration was quite difficult to set up in a live TV studio, as there was interference from cameras and radio mics, which were all radiating in their own way. So when Stephen Arkell from Computer Weekly took the equipment out onto the streets of London, his task was a little easier, to see whether brick walls could protect all that sensitive city information.
We've transferred the screen reading equipment into this van and moved into the City of London at Finsbury Circus. This van isn't specially adapted. In fact, all we've done is put a Citizens Band aerial on the roof and plugged it into the equipment in the back, which is running off two 12-volt car batteries. You can see Treasury convertible stock coming up there. Tender oversubscribed. How difficult was it to get that?
It took approximately 12 minutes.
The first screen proved to have very little information on it, so we moved into Coleman Street, which contains a number of international banks. It looks as though there might be some interesting data on this.
Certainly looks that way.
Oh, that's very clear. We've got Taiwan unsurprised by US trade moves. Industry officials say retaliation was the only option. We've got in bold at the top yearly indications, euro-dollar bonds seem flat to 1/8. That probably means something to somebody. And US Treasuries flat to up to 1/10. February funds open. So I suppose that sort of information could be used to commercial advantage.
If you understand what you're reading.
Yeah.
Obviously, we've been very selective in what we chose to show in that film. But during our investigations, we were able to read very personal data. In particular, the details of one couple's mortgage arrears with the Cheltenham and Gloucester Building Society.
The Ministry of Defence has known about this problem for some time and has devised a set of radiation specifications which computers must meet if they're to be considered secure. The code word for these specifications is Tempest. The problem is that Tempest-proofing a computer costs money. In fact, it virtually doubles the price of the machine.
The specification of a Tempest is on the official secret list, so secret that when we asked Oceanics, a leading manufacturer of Tempest equipment, for a demonstration machine, they were refused permission to lend us one.
And what did the computer manufacturers think of all this? Stephen moved on to the Compaq computer show at Olympia.
The moment we entered Compaq, we picked up an extremely strong signal which we could read from halfway across the hall. Eventually, we tracked down its source. Epson had just unveiled a new personal computer, the PCAX, that morning, And sure enough, when I went inside the stand, that was the computer we had been receiving. Ian Phipps of Epson showed me its security device. So you'd say that data was totally secure on this machine?
Yes.
Well, we've got a demonstration just around the corner. Would you like to come out and have a look at it? We're demonstrating data security on PCs and computers.
Yes, fine.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Just come around here. We can see there the screen of that PCAX. Would you say there was a major problem with security on the screen there?
Well, we are very close to the computer on the stand. I suspect that if this was a mile away or outside a large building, it might not have the same effect.
But we have, in fact, been reading the screen from more than 100 yards away, further on down. Don't you say that's a major problem?
I would say that that screen is very indistinct, actually. I would say you would have very great difficulty in reading that.
Cypher make the monitors for British Telecom's terminals. This was the data as it appeared on their monitor, and it showed up on our equipment like this. Now here we're reading some data from a screen just over here on your stand. Do you think that's a serious problem?
No.
We've actually been out and demonstrated this in the street outside banks in the City of London. Don't you think they ought to know about this problem?
I think that's the bank's problem.
I see. So it's not your problem that this
It's
computer
not our problem.
is emitting this sort of radiation?
No. All terminals do the same.
Although some personal computer manufacturers seem to be aware of the problem, they don't seem to be too worried about it. It is astounding that their attitude is so casual. After all, the problem is fundamental to the security of computer data.
At first glance, what we've done tonight looks quite similar to hacking. Alistair Kelman is a computer barrister. Alistair, is this a form of hacking?
No. Hacking involves a person deceiving a computer into believing he's a legitimate user. All that you've been doing is sitting in the street listening to passing conversations. The conversations just happen to be electronic.
It's rather like overhearing something through an open window.
Yes, and the solution is to close the window.
Right. Let's get this absolutely clear. Is it illegal to build or own or use equipment of this nature?
No, provided it's not used to listen into government departments where you could fall foul of the Official Secrets Act.
Otherwise, it's no more than a radio receiver.
That's correct.
Does the Data Protection Act apply in this case?
Only if personal data is involved. So if you're looking at someone's financial records and those involve people rather than companies, then yes, the Data Protection Act could be involved.
Right, so who would the onus be on to protect the interests of the individual?
It would be on the person who owns the computer and is processing the personal data.
Right, and the man in the street, is it up to that individual to sue the company if things go wrong? Is
yes, he would be entitled to damages if he has suffered damage through the emanation of personal data.
But wait a minute, that means that something would have had to have gone seriously wrong first. He's only entitled to compensation after the event.
That's right.
So the law as it stands does not protect the individual at all until damages have taken place.
That was what Parliament said in the Data Protection Act.
Well, that's it for this week. See you next week when we take a look at computing in education.
Goodbye till then.